Getting started. Let's talk about the resources we might use within our literature review. What sources should it consist of? Where might we find such sources? And where will we begin to look? These are all important points which need to be considered when writing a literature review. According to Bassett 2010, a social science literature review is usually drawn from the following sources: books, journals, conference papers, credible newspapers, websites, government reports, government policy, statistics, archives, and unpublished theses. With regards to knowing what a key text is, there is no exact science, but there are some telltale signs of important texts. 1. You might identify key texts if an author's name keeps appearing in the search results. 2. If authors keep citing a particular author or a particular text, this is usually a good indicator of its importance. Something to remember at this stage: generally, we will not check if the texts are key. It is, however, up to you to convince us that this is an important text by explaining its relevance and making these points clear to the reader. So, with regards to locating texts, we usually find things by doing a keyword search or going through a library search engine. There are some potential problems in keyword searches, however. For example, if you typed into a search engine gender and education, this might result in hundreds, if not thousands, of relevant texts. This would give you far too many texts to manage. So, we might need to narrow the focus of our search. We might need to be more specific and narrow our search to perhaps gender and a specific key stage, or gender and education, but limit the period of our focus, say to perhaps the last 5 years. This should give us a more manageable amount of text to explore. However, we might encounter problems if the search is too narrow. For example, if we typed into a search engine bullying in schools between year 6 boys who were born in January by parents whose first name begins with J and last name begins with C, it is highly unlikely that we will get any results. Having no literature in your area is not always a bad thing, as we will discuss later, but it does present a challenge to writing a literature review. So, instead try to widen your search by finding literature which is closely, if not directly, linked. So, we might have to instead broaden our search to maybe typing into the search engine bullying and primary schools. Let's now think about writing our own literature review. How might we go about structuring it? We can usually structure the literature review in 3 ways: thematically, chronologically, or mixed. Thematically, as we have indicated, is discussing the themes in your project. Chronologically is discussing them in order that the research has taken place, perhaps discussing the development in debate over time. And mixed is a combination of the 2 methods outlined. Let's think about applying a literature review, which is both chronological and thematic, to an example project here, which is titled "The Changing Role of TAs or teaching assistants in the inclusion of Black, Asian and minority ethnic students. We might explore the area of teaching assistants and education policy from a chronological approach, charting the changing developing roles over a period of time or the changing policies over a period of time. We then might want to have another section which explores the theme of inclusion. So this would be a thematic section. And then lastly, we might want to explore the issue of inclusion of Black, Asian and minority ethnic youth in education chronologically. Again, maybe from the period of 1960 through to the present day. This would then represent a mixed approach to structuring your literature review. It is important to remember there is no correct way to structure your literature review. It really is dependent on whatever way you think best suits the story that you are trying to tell or the argument you are trying to convey. Now let's look at linking the literature review back to your research questions. Strong literature reviews will often link back to the project and its aims. To do this in your own project, you must keep your research questions or aims of your project in mind at all times. There are a number of ways to make links between your own project and the literature. Here are a number of the most common. 1. You have found a gap in literature. Usually a lack of knowledge in the area is rare, however it does happen. So, say for example, there's a lot written on bullying, but nothing written specifically on bullying on Facebook, which is what your project is interested in. This represents something of a gap, which your project on bullying on Facebook will seek to address. Within your literature review, you can flag this by including a sentence that might simply state, as a result of this gap in the knowledge on children with insert your theme, my project will explore. The next is you might want to replicate a project or a study. This means you are particularly interested in what somebody has found in a particular area, and you want to replicate this project to find your own results. So, for example, a study might have been conducted on bullying in a specific setting, say Key Stage 3, and you want to replicate this study in Key Stage 2 or 1 or Key Stage 3 in another school. Another method is that you want to add to or extend knowledge. You might want to add to knowledge by showing how this theme works in relation to the area which you are covering. Another way is a methodological connection or expansion. For example, there might have been an interesting study on bullying, but this particular study drew its information or data from quantitative methods such as questionnaires. As a result, in your study, you might want to use interviews to see if they can tell us any more about the existing issue. Okay, let's draw some conclusions. From what we have discussed here, we can glean that a good literature review should not just include or describe everything which has been written in that area. Try to be selective, evaluative, and draw conclusions. Try to use the literature review to explain to the reader why the texts you have chosen are important and relevant to your own study. A good literature review should explain the themes that you want to explore in your study. And lastly, it should explicitly tell the reader how the literature links to your own research questions and objectives. Finally, there are a couple of tasks for you to complete. The first task: read through the provided examples of Level 6 research project literature reviews. Drawing on the lecturer notes and your own reading, put them in order of what you think is the strongest to the least strongest. Make notes to justify your selections. What have they done well, and what have they included? Or what have they not done so well, and how might it be improved? Once you have completed that, the final task: in your own research journal, identify the area or areas that you are interested in focusing your own research project on. Once you've done this, make some notes on what you might include in your literature review and how might you structure it. If you have already identified your 3 key texts, make some notes around why they are relevant to your study. Try to be succinct here. When talking about your 3 key texts, try to use no more than 300 words for each text. Use that 300 words to explain what the text argues and why or how this directly relates to your own project's aims, research questions, or objectives.